Hello and welcome to the last week of October here at Movies You Missed Podcast.
Sad news.
Yeah, I'm Vee.
I'm John.
And we're both actually, now a couple years in, both sad about the fact that this is the end of horror month since John has turned me into a horror fan.
Oh, yes, I have. One of my greatest achievements in life.
I'm flattered.
As am I.
But we both hope that you are all excited for our return last week after our unscheduled hiatus during October. We're still working on those episodes, but in the meantime, we both hope that you're happy to have us back. We certainly are, and are definitely getting back into the swing of things.
Hell yeah, we are.
And for any of those of you who are new, we are two industry veterans who love to recommend movies to you without spoiling them.
No spoilers here, especially in the horror genre.
And these two movies this week certainly fit that bill. We are discussing serial killers this week.
Yes! As twisted as that might have sounded. Yeah, serial killers!
But these movies are actually polar opposites. One is an award-winning classic, and the other one I certainly had never heard of. I wonder if any of our audience had.
I'm very, very curious how many people have actually seen my pick this week. Because I knew about it, I just had never seen it until my wife introduced me to it about 5 or 6 years ago.
I can't believe your wife was the one who introduced you to this film.
Oh yeah, my pick this week is actually one of Amy's favorite films.
Oh my god, okay. Well, before we get into that discussion, we love to discuss the new movies we've seen in theaters or on streaming this week.
I didn't see anything new, but I did go to the Fathom Events re-release of the unrated Saw 20th Anniversary, which was pretty awesome to revisit that movie in theaters.
Especially because you recently got a Saw-themed tattoo.
Absolutely, and I'm a big fan of the entire series, minus Spiral, which seems to be the consensus with every Saw fan. Nothing against Chris Rock or Samuel L. Jackson, but Spiral was not good. All the other Saw movies are pretty fantastic, and getting to revisit this one in theaters really brought back a lot of emotional distress and intensity, so I was very glad to revisit it in theaters and have the chance to see Dina Meyer and Lee Whannell and Carrie Elwes and Tobin Bell and Danny Glover kill it in the first Saw movie that brought us the series that has been going on for the last 20 plus years, so congrats to everybody and hats off to one of the best fucking original movies that I've ever seen.
Awesome.
Hell yeah, and I know you're a fan of the first one, but none of the other ones, or have you not seen any of the other ones?
I haven't seen any of the other ones on purpose. I'm not a fan of torture porn.
Yeah, I know you're not a torture porn fan, but it is far more intricate and story-driven than torture porn. But I understand why you would not want to watch it. But I know you saw some new stuff this week.
I did. I had a very busy week with my sister getting married last weekend. Congratulations, Shannon, a listener of our podcast.
Yay, Shannon.
Very happy for you and Henry. And so I was only able to watch one thing at home because I was so busy, rightly so. But I did have an opportunity to stream the new Anna Kendrick directed and starring movie at my sister Suzanne's house called Woman of the Hour.
Oh, yes. Actually, my wife asked me yesterday morning if I wanted to watch that, and I said, well, mainly because Anna Kendrick directed it, and I'm very interested. Has nothing to do with the fact that it's a Netflix-produced movie, but I'm curious what you thought about it.
It is absolutely fantastic. It is one of my favorite movies of the year.
Wow.
She blew me away with her directorial debut. The shots, her setup, the casting, everything she did was very impressive, especially for a first-time director. It didn't seem like she was a first-time director at all. And
awesome.
This is a really disturbing yet fantastic telling of the Rodney Alcala story, who was a serial killer, and it is truly unsettling. I highly recommend anyone watching this movie. It's not violent in a lot of ways. Like, there's no blood, there's no guts. It's not gratuitous. Yeah. I know, you just watched Saw, right? And instead, I think it's done really tastefully, and it focuses a lot on some of his victims, as well as everything that happened around the fact that he ended up on the dating game in the 70s.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, and that's why it's called Woman of the Hour. Anna Kendrick plays the woman who was choosing the bachelors on that game when he was on it. And Tony Hale's in it. Yeah, and there's this great juxtaposition where it cuts between timelines and stories, but it's very cohesive. It's very coherent. You know exactly what timeline you're in every time there's a cutscene, so she did it really well. My hat's off to her because she just did a great job, and I'm so thrilled for her first movie being as good as it is. I definitely want to recommend it to everybody.
That's awesome. I am an Anna Kendrick fan. I'm sure our listeners remember my pick last year with Anna Kendrick starring and Bill Hader in Noelle. I'm a fan of hers. I like her in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I just like her all around. I've never not been like, no, I'm not going to watch that movie. I really like A Simple Favor with her and Blake Lively. I think she's a great actress, so I'm very interested to see her directorial debut.
Great. Well, I am also going to introduce you a little bit later on to a black rom-com called Mr. Right, starring her and Sam Rockwell. That is really good.
Yeah. I remember that one coming out. I never saw it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of hers as well. So very excited for her future as a director. And yes, she just deserves all the praise and attention for this movie, for sure.
Awesome.
Well, we hope our recaps of new movies we've seen are helpful for you to make decisions on whether or not to see some new movies. And if you strongly disagree with our opinions on any of the new movies we've seen, please let us know.
I would love to know. Yes, absolutely.
And now it's time to discuss serial killers.
Yes.
And since this is an odd episode, John, I believe you go first.
I do, yes. Let's jump into my film. This film comes to us from the year 2006, based on the novel by Patrick Suskind, titled Das Perfume. Screenplay written by Andrew Birkin, Bernd Ischinger, and Tom Tykwer, directed by Tom Tykwer. This film stars Ben Whishaw, Dustin Hoffman, Alan Rickman, and Rachel Hurd Wood. This is Perfume, the story of a murderer.
I am really looking forward to discussing this film.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm excited to hear what your thoughts are, but before we jump into your thoughts, V, I will explain this movie as best I can without spoiling it. This film is set in the 18th century around a gentleman named Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, played by Ben Whishaw. He was born with a superior sense of smell. We learn early on that Jean-Baptiste was born in the fish market of France. His mother had given birth 5 times before, all to stillborn babies. So she was under the impression that he himself was going to be a stillborn baby. So she pops him out and gets right back to work in the fish market. All of a sudden, he starts to cry, and several of her customers realize that there is actually a live baby in the muck of all of this fish market and realize that his mother is trying to abandon him. So what do? They hang her.
Yeah, this movie is graphic and horrible from the get-go.
Oh, absolutely, yes. It is edited so beautifully. The sound effects are incredible. You can almost smell the fish market, right? It's really gross. And oddly enough, for the fish market scene, they used 2.5 tons of fish and 1 ton of beef. And towns 6 miles away from the location of shooting were complaining about the smell from this movie set.
Oh, what a waste.
Well, at the same time, I disagree, because why not bring people into the realism of this movie?
Because you're wasting tons of animals and food. It's not like you could ever use it.
I guess I can see that. Yeah, I guess that's true. All right, solid point. Unless they scooped it all up and used it for catering that day.
Depends on how low budget of a shoot this was.
It wasn't super low budget, but we'll get into that very later on. So Jean-Baptiste, as an infant, is then sold to an orphanage. He spends a lot of time growing up in this orphanage. He does not learn to speak through his childhood to early adolescence, up until the point where he is sold to a tannery to basically do backbreaking work for the rich people of France.
What a miserable existence the first 20 minutes of this movie is.
Oh, hell yeah. Especially when the boys and girls try to kill him in the crib that they put him in. Shit's insane.
Whenever people talk about the good old days, I want to show them the first bit of this movie.
That's actually not a bad idea, because this movie is really, really gross, pretty much from the get-go to the end. I remember when my wife showed me this movie the first time, I turned to her right after Jean-Baptiste was born. I was like, okay, so you like this movie?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, yeah, I love this movie.
I'm absolutely shocked that she likes this movie.
Oh, yeah. She watched the first hour with me the other day, and we will likely finish it because my wife has now been building her horror and serial killer and fantasy list of movies that she wants to own. And I've wanted to own this movie ever since I saw it for the first time. Not only because it's such a twisted-ass movie, but it is an absolutely stunning piece of cinematography film. And I think the cast and acting is absolutely fantastic. But we'll get into that in just a little bit. So after Jean-Baptiste is sold to this tannery, he and us as an audience are really starting to realize that he has this sense of smell that really can pick out anything fresh. And one evening, while Jean-Baptiste is in the city of Paris, he catches wind of a scent that he's never experienced before. And he starts to follow this scent, and it ultimately ends up being the scent of a woman. The Al Pacino movie. Not really.
That was perfect.
But at the same time, it is the scent of a woman. He comes across this young woman that is selling plums throughout the city of Paris, 2 for a sou, as she says. And I remember looking at Amy, I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And I've been to Paris before. I just never really learned any of the language because I was also 13, and I figured my parents knew, so, I didn't necessarily need to learn anything, which is a little bit ignorant of me. I should have learned a little bit. I think I learned merci and one other word, but other than that, anyway, we're not here to talk about my stupidity as a teenager. We're here to talk about Perfume.
That would take a while.
It really would. Thank you. You were there for a lot of it.
Yep.
So as he has come across this young lady with just beautiful red hair, and I mean, this woman is actually very gorgeous. She's a beautiful woman. He cannot get the idea that something or someone can smell so good. So he is basically starting his really early creepy madness by just trying to sniff as much of her as possible before she gets away from him. She ultimately escapes. Not that he's trying to do anything horrendous yet, but at one point later on, he ends up killing her because he's trying to keep her quiet from another couple of people that are passing by. And after she's dead, he spends a solid 5 minutes smelling her from head to toe and every single inch of her body.
What a creep.
Yeah, very much so. Very, very much so. After this has happened, he ends up coming across Giuseppe Baldini, who is played by Dustin Hoffman, and realizing that Baldini is actually a perfumer and the creator of some of the best perfumes in Paris and the world. But he's also in competition with another perfumer that's in the city of Paris. And Jean-Baptiste keeps telling him that he has the best nose in... Well, you know what? Why not? Just listen to this.
You have, it appears, a fine nose, young man, but...
My nose knows all the smells in the world. It's the best nose in Paris. Only I don't know the names. I need to learn the names.
No, basta! You don't interrupt me when I'm speaking. You are both impertinent and insolent. Even I don't know every scent. I've, of course, known for some time the ingredients of amore and psyche, but all it needs to find that out is a possibly fine nose, nothing else. But it needs the craft of a true perfumer to detect the exact formula. Which notes, which chords, and in what precise measurements. Could you tell me the exact formula of amore and psyche? Best nose in Paris.
So after this moment of Jean-Baptiste and Baldini in Baldini's basement, Jean-Baptiste tells him that if he can work for him and learn how to distill scent from anything and everything, he will be his amanuensis, basically his protege. Baldini is not on board with this just yet, but Jean-Baptiste convinces him by creating some of the most incredible perfumes that he's ever smelled in his life. And Baldini says to him, if you create 100 perfumes for me, then I will take you on as my protege, and I will teach you how to distill scent from everything and anything. So this partnership, this protege master situation between Baldini and Jean-Baptiste lasts for quite some time. And Jean-Baptiste starts to get on Baldini about the fact that, again, he wants to distill scent from everything and everything. But Baldini tells him that he ended up learning in the city of Grasse, which is just outside of Paris. So Baldini ultimately ends up writing a letter of recommendation for Jean-Baptiste to bring to the city of Grasse, where Baldini has learned how to distill scent from anything and everything, and sends Jean-Baptiste on his way to Grasse to start to learn this process and create perfumes that nobody has ever smelled before, but will ultimately be the best perfumes in the world. So Jean-Baptiste makes his way to the city of Grasse and ultimately starts to figure out a way to truly distill anything and every one. And the fact of the matter of this movie is, it's in the title, Perfume, the Story of a Murderer. He's so obsessed with the scent of these women that, again, he's never smelled before. He just wants to hold on to these scents. And another thing that actually Baldini does before he sends him off to the city of Grasse is explains to him that there's a heart and soul to perfume. And that whole sequence I really, really like. And I think everybody should listen to this.
Now, pay careful attention to what I tell you. Just like a musical chord, a perfume chord contains 4 essences or notes, carefully selected for their harmonic affinity. Each perfume contains 3 chords, the head, the heart, and the base, necessitating 12 notes in all. The head chord contains the first impression, lasting a few minutes before giving way to the heart chord, the theme of the perfume, lasting several hours. Finally, the base chord, the trail of the perfume, lasting several days. Mind you, the ancient Egyptians believed that one can only create a truly original perfume by adding an extra note. One final essence that will ring out and dominate the others. Legend has it that an amphora was once found in a pharaoh's tomb, and when it was opened, a perfume was released. After all those thousands of years, a perfume of such subtle beauty and yet such power that for one single moment, every person on earth believed they were in paradise. 12 essences could be identified, but the 13th, the vital one, could never be determined.
And I thought that whole sequence was actually pretty incredible because I've worn cologne, my wife wears perfume, my mother, my sister, so many friends of mine. V, I'm not actually sure what your take on perfume is, but I've spent some coin on perfume for my wife and she for me on cologne, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's always fascinated me how perfume is made. And that's one thing that I really like early on when Jean-Baptiste ends up going to Baldini and he starts just pulling random bottles off the shelf and he recreates that one perfume from that other perfumer. And Baldini's just kind of like, how did you do that? Mm-hmm. I don't understand this. So after all of this, Baldini telling Jean-Baptiste about the heart and soul of perfuming and how you really need to find the essence of certain essential oils and, you know, roses and grass and all this kind of stuff, it's really a science creating a perfume. And I completely agree because the cologne that I wear is cocktails and cigars, and it smells like cocktails and cigars. I got my wife a bottle of Dior when we were at Epcot the last time, and I've never smelled Dior perfume, but it smells incredible, and, you know, it works for her. So not only do we learn this as an audience, but we also are with Jean-Baptiste throughout this entire thing. And again, this is the 18th century. This is early 1700s. And, you know, perfume has been around for as long as history, really. You know, like you think about
ancient Egyptians.
Exactly, yeah. And, you know, Marie Antoinette, all that kind of stuff. Like French perfume is the whole thing that people really like to spend their money on. And I used to really like German cologne. I used to have a bottle of this stuff called Zara that I actually got in Munich, Germany that smelled incredible. And the ladies swooned. So after Baptiste gets to grass and starts to learn this process of distilling, not only just flower petals and grass and everything, he starts to, and by anything and everything, I mean that he starts to tail women, murder them, like by clubbing them over the head, and distilling their essence into a perfume, and using these essential oils from these women as the heart and soul of the perfume that he plans to create. And for the rest of the movie, we are with Jean-Baptiste while he murders several women, distills their bodies horrifically, and I gotta tell you, as fucked up as this movie is, it's kind of fucking brilliant too.
It's original, I'll give it that.
Yeah, for sure. So now, again, this is my second or third time seeing this movie. I watched this movie, I would say, within the first year that Amy and I lived together. I might have watched it one other time, so I'm going to say that this was my third time from beginning to end. I still love this movie, as twisted as it is. I've not read the book. I feel like I should. Mm-hmm. Maybe one day I'll get to it. But V, I know this was your first experience watching Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, and I know you're a big Ben Whishaw fan, as well as an Alan Rickman fan. So I'm curious, what did you think of Perfume, The Story of a Murderer?
I am traumatized.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
I thought that this movie, especially the way it opens, I thought with that flash forward and then flash back, that the movie would actually have us build some empathy for this character.
Oh, sure.
Good Lord, was I wrong.
Oh, yeah, big time.
And I was disturbed from the get-go. This movie makes me extremely uncomfortable.
Sure.
Which I'm sure is part of the whole point. But I really didn't enjoy my time just because I was uncomfortable, not because it's a bad movie. I absolutely loved Ben Whishaw in this role. He was so creepy, a completely opposite turn of everything I've ever seen from him otherwise.
Right.
I was extremely impressed. Alan Rickman, of course, delivers because he delivers every time he's on camera, and this was no different. I thought Dustin Hoffman was horribly miscast. He's supposed
I'll
to
agree.
Oh, okay, good. He's supposed
completely.
to be an Italian. His accent is all over the place, honestly.
Yes,
And
it is.
it really took me out of the role. I think an Italian actor that wasn't an A-lister, I think would have been a much better casting choice.
I completely agree. Yeah, watching it this time around, I was like, as much as I love Hoffman, and I know you do too, we just discussed Tootsie not very long ago.
Right.
He's a great actor, but it's almost like, I think this might have been my first Ben Whishaw experience next to Cloud Atlas.
Okay.
And I mean, we've seen Alan Rickman for however many years, but Hoffman was a little bit miscast. There could have been somebody that I'd never heard of that was actually Italian that could have killed that role.
Yeah.
Like, there are moments that he's good, but overall, it's like, okay, that's Dustin Hoffman. It's
Exactly.
like you're not sucked into Baldini like you should be, because I was completely sucked into Jean Baptiste, like 100%. Like, I was in for the ride. So I completely get what you're saying, but continue.
I absolutely loved the close-ups and the cinematography in this movie. For as disgusting as it is, there is a lot of beauty in terms of the shots.
Oh, yes.
I really like how they portrayed his experience and how he experienced life and the smells within it. I thought that was
absolutely.
really well done and translated well to the audience in terms of communicating that.
Yeah.
But it was so disturbing, and I really don't usually enjoy movies where there aren't the redeemable characters. I mean, Alan Rickman, of course, is someone who is a good character in this movie, but otherwise, oh man, it's a pretty miserable experience.
It is. It most definitely is, yeah.
With their
Right from the
lives and
get-go.
also as an audience member.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
then the movie just goes off the rails. And the last note I have for this movie is, well, that was weird.
Yeah.
Because there's a little bit more of... I don't like when movies have an established reality for you, and then all of a sudden, at one point, they change the paradigm, and all of a sudden you're supposed to suspend your belief because now there's a unicorn in the movie, right? And you're like, wait, where the fuck did this just come from?
I can get behind that for sure.
And I feel that way in the third act of this movie.
Okay.
And that actually threw me a bit off kilter. And so I can respect that this is a well-made movie. This is an ambitious movie. It's unique. It's very original in not only its storyline, but also how it's portrayed on film. It's very well done in a lot of ways. I didn't enjoy it, but I don't think it's a bad movie.
All right, I gotcha. Similar to The Lighthouse. You didn't enjoy it, but you don't think it's a bad movie.
No, I'm looking back, and I actually really enjoyed The Lighthouse. It's fucking weird and really messed up. I would watch that with you again, though.
Oh, all right. Fucking fantastic.
Yeah. Like, that actually, with a little bit of distance from that first watch, I'm like, no, that's a great movie, and I could watch it again. It's weird, but I'll watch it again.
Yeah.
And, hey, maybe one day I'd feel that way about this movie, but I was much less uncomfortable watching The Lighthouse than I was in this movie, surprising as that may sound.
That is actually very surprising, yeah.
But, God, he's such a creep.
Oh, yeah. Watching it this time around after he kills the first girl and, like, strips her and starts to, like, cup up all her body and, like, just, like, smells his hands, and he's getting into every crevice and everything. It's just like, oh, boy.
Yeah.
To an extent, that it's definitely a fetish, right? Like, people love
absolutely.
the smell of people that, don't wear cologne, that maybe don't shower. And this is set in the time where people were wearing the same clothes for days and days on end and sleeping in the same clothes, which Tom Tykwer actually told a lot of the cast members and background, once they got dressed, to not change out of their clothing for at least 6 days and to sleep in their costume so that they could really get into the whole situation of, back in the 18th century. So there's as much realism as there can be in a movie like this.
Well, and I like that this movie, finally, there's a movie that portrays the realities of the smells of ancient times or olden times, right?
Right.
Because you see all these Westerns and they have crisp white shirts, right? Or,
exactly.
These movies.
Nobody's clean in this movie.
No, nor should they be.
Nobody's clean.
Nobody was clean back then.
Right, yeah.
And there's all these movies like Shakespeare in Love or, movies set back in the 17 or 1800s that they don't really portray how disgusting it was back then.
Right, yeah.
And I like that this movie had that realism to it.
I completely agree. I like that they went there. They decided that this was going to be as accurate a portrayal of the times as possible. And like I said, nobody's clean in this movie. The fish market sequence for the first 5 minutes is disgusting. It's so gross. And the fact that it's all practical fish and meat, and the fact that cities 6 miles away were complaining about the stench in the air just makes me wonder how awful it smelled for the crew and how awful they smelled when they went back to their hotels at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I appreciate that and respect it, but again, I didn't enjoy watching this film. I don't hate it because I think it's bad, though. It's a good, well-made piece of cinema.
Sure.
But don't ever make me watch this movie again.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love it. It's interesting to be like, oh, I agree, but I would watch this again. It's one of Amy's favorite movies, so we will watch this movie again. Believe me. I'd be like, what? Like, she hates Silence of the Lambs, which we're going to talk about shortly. She hates Trainspotting. Yeah, she doesn't like movies that are, and not that this movie is disgusting for disgusting's sake, because
it's not gratuitous.
No, exactly, yes. And I think that might be what it is. I think the non-gratuitousness of just about everything. Like, there's a lot of nudity in this movie. There is an orgy scene towards the climax of the movie where everybody starts to... Yeah, exactly. Good Lord, I didn't even realize that. That's amazing. But yes, there's a lot of nudity in this movie, male and female. So it's fascinating to see this movie with not just female nudity. There's male nudity as well. And even while he's trying to distill the scent of these women, it's not, I don't even want to say it's like a sexual thing. Like,
no,
he just
it's very
wants
clinical.
To smell. Yeah, he wants to smell these women. And to an extent,
weirdo.
I kind of get that. Yeah, but I love the way that my wife smells, right out of the shower or, after waking up in the morning. It's just it's pheromones, right? Like it's literally
but that's
a
consensual.
Human body. Okay, I'll give you that. It is consensual with my wife. Jean-Baptiste is doing this completely non-consensual by murdering these beautiful women and trying to distill their scent. So I get it. But I'm glad you enjoyed your time with it. You probably won't ever watch it again. I will agree, it is a very fantastically well-made movie. Cinematography is amazing. The soundtrack's fantastic. John Hurt's narration is fantastic. It took me about a minute to finally realize that it was John Hurt from Harry Potter and the Hellboy movies. And of course, as there's quiet times in the movie after a narration, I'm like, there are things that go bump in the night. And I'm just like, oh yeah, Hellboy. Great voice, just a great narration. Tom Tykwer is one of the 3 directors on Cloud Atlas, which is one of my favorite movies. He also directed Run, Lola, Run, which is a fantastic movie that I'm going to introduce you to in the future on this podcast because it is such a magnificent movie. So I overall, I think the movie, like you said, it's very well made. It's very well done. The acting is fantastic, not just by Alan Rickman, Ben Whishaw. I've never not liked him. I think he literally delivers in everything, including the Paddington movies where he plays the voice of Paddington. This guy is a fantastic actor. He plays one of my favorite characters in Cloud Atlas. He plays Robert Frobisher. And I can't wait to introduce you to Cloud Atlas. It's going to be as problematic as ever, but it's still a great fucking movie. And I can't wait to get into that one. But before that happens, I would really like to start getting into a lot of the behind the scenes. The production ended up scouting 8 different countries and landed on Barcelona, Spain for the location of most of this movie, which is pretty awesome. I mean, beautiful locations.
Yeah.
As of 2006, this was the most expensive German film ever made.
Oh, it's German?
Yes, Tom Tykwer is of German descent, and he just kind of decided to take the reins of a French story and have some fun with it, and I think he did a great job. There are 67 speaking roles in this entire film. Yeah. V, I'm curious if you can guess the amount of background that were used in this movie.
Oh, I would say at least 1,000 because of a couple of those mob scenes. I would say maybe even 2,200.
Okay, well, you are off by 3,000. There were 5,200 background actors for this movie.
Oh my God.
102 sets and 520 different technicians were employed on the production of this movie.
A little bit different scale than The Thing last week.
Right, yes. Now, the climax, pun intended, orgy scene had 750 background involved in that scene, 40 makeup artists, and 35 wardrobe assistants.
Why do they need an wardrobe? They're all naked.
I know, right? Well, they have to get out of the wardrobe.
I guess.
And I mentioned that Tom Tykwer told background and actors to stay in their costumes for up to 7 days while shooting this movie. And the costume designer Pierre-Yves Gaillard spent 15 weeks researching the time period. He made 1,400 costumes for this movie.
Holy shit.
Yeah, all practical costumes, all aged a different way, dyed a different way. And again, this movie's dirty. Like, and not just, oh, it's dirty. No, this is a filthy fucking movie.
It really, all the dirt, all the grime, all disgusting 18th century. You can almost smell this movie.
Exactly. It's almost like this could be the first scratch and sniff movie.
Oh, God, I hope not.
I hope not, too. But Tom Tykwer was so meticulous about how the dirt looked in certain scenes that he was dubbed the Lord of the Dirt during the production of this movie. Yeah. Patrick Suskind, the writer of the original book, had been approached several times to have the rights purchased to make this into a movie. Finally, he relented and was paid 10 million euros for the rights for this movie.
Whoa!
By the production company and Tom Tykwer. Martin Scorsese, Milos Forman, Stanley Kubrick, and Roman Polanski all expressed interest in making this movie way back in the day, obviously, because Kubrick died before 2000.
Of course Roman Polanski was interested, fucking pervert.
I know. Ridley Scott and Tim Burton were attached at two separate times for this movie.
Absolutely not.
I'm so glad it didn't work out for either of them.
Yeah.
We are big fans of both.
No,
but
you're big fans of both. I'm not a fan of Tim Burton at all.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Oh, wow. I thought you were a Tim Burton fan, at least like one or two movies. Oh, all right. Well, interesting.
Like, Batman Returns is a movie I like of his, and that's about it.
All right. I gotcha.
He's made some very problematic statements that have made me even less of a fan of his. Let's put it that way.
Oh, fascinating. Okay. I must not be privy to those. Maybe you'll have to tell me about that later on.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it didn't work out for any one of these directors as much as I love Scorsese and Milos Forman. We will be discussing a Milos Forman film shortly when I choose Amadeus, because that is literally one of the most perfect films ever made. I think Kubrick could have had a great time with this and done a really good job.
Yeah, it was a weird enough script that I think Kubrick would have done a good job with it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But the production schedule would probably have been like 3 years
insane.
long.
Yeah.
The fish didn't fall right. Back to one. Yeah, I can only imagine that. As much murder that's in Scorsese movies, I just, for whatever reason, I can't picture Scorsese jumping into this and bringing it to life the way that Tom Tykwer did.
Agreed.
This movie had its Munich premiere on September 7th of 2006, and the U.S. wide release was January 5th of 2007.
Oh,
the budget,
my God. So it's technically a 2007 movie.
It is technically a 2007 movie, but technically not because it had its Munich premiere worldwide. This is a foreign film, if you will, in 2006. I knew that was coming. I knew it. I just did 2007 last week.
Well, you've done as many 2006 movies too, though.
I really have, yeah. I know I won't go through the whole breakdown of 2006, but there's some good ones that year, I'm sure you all remember.
Yes.
This film had a $60 million budget.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it makes sense because majority of these locations, everything was practical. Like you look at this movie, there's nothing CGI in this movie at all.
No.
Except for maybe the one scene where the bridge collapses. But other than that, it's all just, it's so, the locations where Alan Rickman takes his daughter, just stunning location. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I want to go there so bad. The domestic U.S. box office for this movie was a very, very sad $2.2 million.
Totally makes sense. Foreign movies don't usually do well in U.S. box office, especially a movie like this.
I know, exactly. And that year, too. That was 2006, 2007 were a lot of really good feel-good movies.
Yeah.
And this movie is not one of those types of movies. The worldwide box office, though, 135 mil.
Whoa!
Yeah, so it did pretty well worldwide.
Yeah.
Did really, really well. Yeah, so congratulations to everybody involved with that, including Ben Whishaw and Tom Tykwer and the other writers and the author of the novel. And again, I've done the year 2006 multiple times, but I will just tell you that the worldwide box office gross of $135 million brought this movie in at number 40, so it hit the top 50 of worldwide box office gross. And I think that that's fantastic. And I think the movie's great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. You said, you'll never watch it again. But you did, though.
No.
You did.
No, I did not enjoy my time watching this film. I was very upset this movie is 2.5 hours long. I was uncomfortable the entire time. I respect that it's a well-made film. I respect that everybody did a great job.
Except for Dustin Hoffman.
Except for Dustin Hoffman. It creeped me out, and I don't ever want to watch it again.
All right. Well, in a lot of regards, I would say that that's good news, like
No,
a
I
movie
didn't hate
affected you
it.
that much.
Yeah.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying. Like a movie
Yeah.
affected you that much that you don't want to watch it again, but you can respect the behind the scenes and the production and the cast and everything involved in making you feel as uncomfortable as you did for 2.5 hours.
Yes, I respect this as a cinematic product.
Perfect. Fantastic. And I'm glad to hear it. I'm sure Amy, my wife, will be very glad to hear that as well.
Yeah.
And when you come visit next time, we'll have a viewing party.
No, never gonna happen.
We'll just stand in the room and just spray perfume at each other all night.
That I'd be okay with.
All right.
My
sweet.
sister Shannon and I have done a couple of trips out to different stores and done perfume testing, and it always just devolves into spraying each other. It's so much fun.
I'm so glad that I stopped spraying myself like 19 times with my cologne, and I'd literally just do my wrist, and that's it.
I appreciate that too.
Yeah, I used to really stink of my Anchor Blue cologne and Pacific, whatever. What was it? Pacific Sunwear. All those colognes when I was like 13, 14. I was like, yeah, I'm a skater, but not really. Well, cool. Good. If you are an interested party that would like to check out Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, it is currently streaming for free on Paramount Plus, which is how I watched it. I will be owning a physical copy of this movie very soon because my wife wants it in my collection and hers. Again, great movie, great time, awesome discussion. I can't wait to jump into your pick this week, V, because it is a movie that I now watch every year because, well, we'll get into why very shortly, I'm sure.
Good.
It is so good, just like mine this week. So, V, why don't you take it away? V, do you have any lotion nearby?
Funny enough, I do. I always have lotion nearby.
Put the lotion in the basket. If that's not a hint, I'll let V take it away. V, the floor is yours.
Thank you. That is a pretty fantastic hint. Most people, I'm sure, would recognize it. If not, that's okay, because I will tell you I picked the 1991 Oscar-winning horror classic, The Silence of the Lambs.
Hello, Clarice.
And with that, I will jump into the plot and discuss not only Clarice more, but also the man who said that line, Dr.
Yes.
Hannibal Lecter. This movie opens up on the FBI training ground with Clarice Starling, an FBI trainee, she's not an agent yet, running through the different obstacles on the course. She's stopped and told to go to Jack Crawford's office, who was actually a professor of hers back when she was at UVA studying criminology and psychology. He now is one of the directors or the director of the behavioral science unit at the FBI. That is the classic profiler unit. And that's a real thing that I'll get into a little bit later.
Yes.
We learn pretty quickly that there is a serial killer on the loose named Buffalo Bill who has been kidnapping and killing young women.
There's a theme to this episode.
A little bit, yeah. I think that's probably why you picked your movie to pair when I put The Silence of the Lambs on the list.
That's exactly what happened.
There we go. And Jack Crawford has asked Clarice to go to a Baltimore psychiatric hospital to interview the infamous Dr. Hannibal Lecter because they are continuing to gather data for their behavioral science unit. As an eager trainee, of course, Clarice says yes, and she goes off to Baltimore and into the creepiest, dankest, dungeon-looking psychiatric hospital that should have been shut down a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
She gets introduced to a creep named Dr. Chilton, who is, I would rather have dinner with Dr. Hannibal Lecter than Dr. Chilton.
Oh, absolutely. That actor has always creeped me out. And he could be in a comedy, and I'm like, dude, fuck off.
Slimy. Yeah, just exudes slime and yeah, gives you the willies for sure.
Oh, yes.
And now we have the iconic introduction of Anthony Hopkins playing Dr. Hannibal Lecter. I love the framing of this movie. The cinematography is incredible. And right off the bat, you can tell that Hannibal Lecter is one of those people who's always in control of the situation.
Oh, big time.
No matter which one he's in, including when he's in a cell, he's still in control.
Hell yeah.
And he gives Clarice a run for her money, especially since she's so wet behind the ears as a FBI trainee.
Oh, Agent Starling, you think you can dissect me with this blunt little tool?
No. I thought that your knowledge...
You're so ambitious, aren't you? Do you know what you look like to me with your good bag and your cheap shoes? You look like a rube. A well-scrubbed, hustling rube with a little taste. Good nutrition's given you some length of bone, but you're not more than one generation from poor white trash, are you, Agent Starling? And that accent you've tried so desperately to shed, pure West Virginia. What does your father do? Is he a coal miner? Does he stink of the land? You know how quickly the boys found you, all those tedious, sticky fumblings in the backseats of cars, while you could only dream of getting out, getting anywhere, getting all the way to the FBI.
And Clarice continues to stumble through, but for some reason, they actually are building a bit of a rapport, and Hannibal Lecter seems to be getting a little bit interested in his conversation with Clarice. Unfortunately, she leaves empty-handed. He is not interested in filling out this questionnaire that Jack Crawford has created for serial killers and sends her on her way. And at this moment, she gets assaulted by one of the other prisoners. And I can tell you, I was too young to watch this movie because I did not understand this scene at all when I watched it for the first time.
Well, I guess now's as good a time as any. The first time I ever watched this movie was in 2011, so I knew what was going on in that scene.
Yeah. And
so awful.
So awful, but you and I had a great conversation in 2011 about this movie.
We sure did.
I gave you a bunch of shit about it, actually.
Yeah, you did. I actually have the conversation pulled up right now. Because I posted it on my Facebook page. And my post on May 19th of 2011, watch Silence of the Lambs today for the first time. Pretty damn good. Your comment, you call yourself a movie buff?
And I
said,
stand by that
we've
statement.
been over this. Yeah. It took me a long time to watch this movie. You know, this was not a movie my parents were going to let me watch. That's for damn sure.
Right. And we had been over it because there were several movies that you had seen for the first time over the years that you'd posted about on Facebook. I'm like, dude, if you're a movie buff, you should have watched this movie already.
Yes. And this was definitely one of them.
But funny enough, May 18th was the premiere of our podcast, so that's kind of funny timing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
But I'm glad you've seen this movie now repeatedly over the years and are a big fan of it.
Oh, yeah.
I would actually not be thrilled to be introducing you to this movie for the first time, only because that means you would have missed opportunities to see it previously. Because it's so damn good.
Yeah.
Watch it as soon as you can.
Yeah. That was 13 years ago.
It was.
And ever since then, I have watched it every year. I was actually gifted the Blu-ray on Christmas by my parents. My parents are big fans of Silence of the Lambs.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I love when your parents shock me with their taste.
Oh, yeah. When I saw this, I remember growing up, my parents were like, oh, Silence of the Lambs is such a good movie, but it's so creepy. And then I saw it, and then that year, actually, in 2011, I opened the Blu-ray for Christmas morning. And I was like, whoa, you guys got me Silence of the Lambs? Like, yeah, I thought you liked it. I'm like, oh, I love it. But I didn't think that would be a movie you would get me. Like, no, we like that movie too. We just don't watch it as often as you probably would.
Awesome.
Yes. I don't think my parents would like Perfume, the story of a murderer.
No, not at all. Not in any way, shape, or form. And so back to the Silence of the Lambs. Clarice has now left the psychiatric hospital, and it turns out she did, in fact, build a rapport with Dr. Lecter. And now Jack Crawford has told her that Lecter wants to see her again. And what proceeds is several meetings with the two of them as the investigation of Buffalo Bill is hanging over everyone's head and is playing out in the background. And it turns out that Hannibal Lecter not only has a lot of insights into this investigation that could help them, but also it turns out that he has crossed paths with this man in the past. And what proceeds is this chess game between Dr. Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling with Jack Crawford, and also Dr. Chilton gets thrown in.
Oh, yeah.
Because everybody is having this battle of wits trying to get information to catch the serial killer Buffalo Bill before he strikes again. And unfortunately, this is all playing out since he has kidnapped a young woman named Catherine Martin, who's actually the daughter of a senator from Tennessee. So now this is a media frenzy. Now the head of the FBI is involved. And I love how the older I get, the more I can follow all these beautiful subplots. And I can say beautiful even though this movie is not only creepy but disturbing as hell.
Oh, yeah.
But it is a beautifully crafted movie. The older I get, the more I can follow all of these subplots, and the movie ties itself together so well. Because, yeah, when I watched this as a kid, I didn't know what the hell was going on, and I really didn't understand the connections between Dr. Lecter and Buffalo Bill, and now I can, which is great. I've loved this movie since I was a kid, and I watch it every 2 years or so just because it's so good. The revisit this time was just as fun, especially watching it on my big TV at night with surround sound.
Yeah.
It was an absolute treat. I'm so glad you love this film, and one of the reasons why I think it's so good is because of the casting.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone was perfectly cast in their roles. Jodie Foster comes across as determined, even though she's very new, even though she is definitely a novice, and she portrays that really well, but you still want to follow her and root for her as she's moving forward in this investigation. Do we really even need to say anything about Anthony Hopkins as Dr. Hannibal Lecter? Because
I don't think so, but we could.
I don't think I'd do it justice.
Yeah, right? So fucking good.
Ted Levine as Buffalo Bill. Good
Oh,
God.
yeah.
And the fact that both of them vie for who is creepier in this movie is a testament to both of their performances.
Absolutely.
And of course, there's the classic line that you introed me in with.
It rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's told.
And I'm so glad to bring this movie up to our audience because I think it's been long enough where it's good to remind people that this movie exists and is absolutely worth revisiting.
Hell yeah.
So I'm going to pause right there and ask John if he'd like to add anything to the discussion regarding your experience watching this movie, or if I missed anything in the plot, or if there's any trivia you'd like to know. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, let me jump in for a minute. I definitely remember the first time I watched this when it ended. I did my usual thing with movies that creep me out or, kind of get me uncomfortable. I walked around the apartment for a little while and just kind of took a couple of deep breaths and realized that everything that everybody had ever told me about this movie was true. It was one of those movies that had been a staple of the early 90s. And I was about maybe 10 or 11 years old when I was over at a family friend's house. And I was given permission to go on the computer, and they had this program that was like the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? Like
yeah.
You could like scroll through.
I remember that.
And I typed in movies, and it just had a bunch of clips of a whole bunch of different movies from the 80s and the 90s. And one of the clips was from The Silence of the Lambs, and I think it was around the second or third time that Clarice goes back to start to chat with Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, okay.
And it was all done in close-ups between Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. And I closed it out after that clip. I didn't know what the hell that movie was at that point. This is probably 1995 or 1996 or something like that. And my dad came into the room and he was like, "What have you been looking at?" I'm like, "Oh, I've been looking at movie clips." And I hit the little minimize button, but it brought back that clip of Silence of the Lambs. And my dad's like, "Were you watching The Silence of the Lambs?" I said, "No, this is just a clip from that movie. I didn't even watch it. I just didn't know what the hell." I didn't say what the hell, but I was like, I don't even know what this movie is, so I wasn't interested. I was trying to find Disney movies or clips of Jurassic Park or stuff like that. And he goes, "Okay, well, just don't tell your mother that you saw a clip from Silence of the Lambs." I was like, okay, whatever the hell that means. And then, fast forward like 10 years later, maybe 15 years later at that point, I watched the movie and I was just like, holy shit, this movie is insane. But it's a beautifully made movie. Like you said, the cast is fantastic. When I watched it this time around, I did not watch this last year around Halloween. I was getting through other movies. But having the opportunity to revisit it this last week, I was in my theater room, had all the lights off, I had a beer in my hand, and just such sharp dialogue. Mm-hmm. And man, Anthony Hopkins is so terrifying. Even though he's trying to be somewhat like civil with Clarice, it's one of those. This movie's an experience, right? Like you can't really, in my personal opinion, I can't put into words why this movie's so good. It just is. Like it exists. It's so good. It's so well done. Everybody's fantastic. Editing's great. Soundtrack's great. Cast is fantastic. It's one of those staples of not just the 90s, but of cinema. Like so many people. Even now in 2024, this movie's now 30 years old, they're still talking about it. And that's a testament to the fact that this is truly one of the best thrillers that's come out throughout cinematic history.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that.
So yeah, I am a major fan. And like I said, I got it for Christmas that year. And it was so funny. When I opened it, I looked at my parents and was like, "You got me Silence of the Lambs on Blu-ray, no less." And they're like, "Yeah, we saw it in the $5 bin. We knew you liked the movie. We like it too. We figured why not?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah. All right.
Oh my God.
Awesome. I like it. I'm
you
down."
do know me.
Yeah, exactly, right? You do. You like me. No. But yeah, it was it is. It's a great movie. I remember one of the last times that I watched it, my wife was in the kitchen and I had it on pretty loud. And it was around the time where Hannibal is doing the whole, like, I ate his liver with, fava beans and a glass of Chianti. And Amy just looked at me and goes, this movie's creepy and I'm not even watching it. And I'm like, yeah, this movie's fucking creepy.
It is.
And she had no idea about Buffalo Bill yet. Like, yeah. Ted Levine is so crazy. Even the dog is awesome. I love the dog in this movie.
Yeah, precious.
Yeah. You don't know what pain is.
He's great as well as everybody else, and I'm so glad you love this movie as much as I do. I actually don't know anyone who doesn't like this film.
Same.
And not only are we big fans of this movie, we're also big fans of its cast. This is the fourth film of Jodie Foster's that we've picked.
Very true, yeah.
For episode 18, she starred in Inside Man.
Yes.
Which I personally like older Jodie Foster more than younger Jodie Foster.
Okay.
I also find her much more attractive as older Jodie Foster.
I will agree with you there.
Oh,
yeah.
there we go.
After Naiad, I mean, not even that. After a very long engagement, I was like, all right, Jodie Foster, I'm in.
Oh, yeah. That was another movie she appeared in on this podcast. It was your pick for episode 109.
Yes.
And she appeared in another pick of yours, the movie Maverick from episode 63.
Hell yeah.
Some other movies of hers that we enjoy, Panic Room, Contact.
Oh, yeah.
Naiad, as you said, it was one of our favorite films of 2023.
Great movie.
And most recently, she appeared in this season of True Detective. Highly recommend.
That's right.
It's a great show.
I gotta check it out. I still have not watched that season.
Season's so good. I think this is the first Anthony Hopkins movie we've picked.
I think you're right, yeah.
Other movies that he starred in, The Elephant Man, The Bounty with Mel Gibson, Bram Stoker's Dracula,
Yeah.
Chaplin, The Remains of the Day, Legends of the Fall, which is, I think, going to be on my list in the future.
Still have not seen that one.
Oh, I know, yeah. Nixon, Amistad, The Mask of Zorro.
Oh, yeah.
Meet Joe Black, he was the best part of that film. He's actually the director in Mission Impossible 2, so he and Tom Cruise have a bunch of scenes together.
All right.
He appears as Odin in the MCU in the Thor movies.
Yeah.
He's in this movie that I really enjoyed. It's a biopic called The World's Fastest Indian. He plays a New Zealander who races an Indian motorcycle on the salt flats of Utah. It's a very fun film.
I never saw that. I heard that was a good one. Yeah, I never did see that one.
I watched it in my 20s when I was living in Glendale and when Netflix was still sending you DVDs in the mail.
Oh, I remember those days.
And more recently, he appeared in the movie The Father.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He won an Oscar for that one.
He did win an Oscar for it. Scott Glenn plays Jack Crawford, Jodie Foster's mentor and boss. He has been in Apocalypse Now, Urban Cowboy, The Right Stuff, which is going to be on the list in the future, a Western called Silverado, another movie that's going to be on the list in the future.
Awesome.
The original Man on Fire movie.
Oh.
The Hunt for Red October, Backdraft, and Courage Under Fire.
He was also in my pick of Training Day.
He was! That's right. I apologize. I totally forgot about that.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And Ted Levine, the iconic Buffalo Bill.
Yes.
That man is so talented because he went from Silence of the Lambs and made sure he wasn't typecast and started appearing as army generals and cops moving forward.
Yeah. That's true. He did.
Crazy. He was in my pick from episode 60, Heat. He was one of Al Pacino's men.
Nice.
He also is General Bloodbath McGrath in the Wild Wild West.
I don't even remember him in that.
I purposely blocked that movie from my memory.
There you go.
Why
Makes
waste
sense.
gray matter on that one? He appears as a general in the movie Evolution.
Oh, I don't remember him in Evolution, but that's cool.
Oh, yeah. He's the one that David Duchovny moons.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
He is also Brian's boss in The Fast and the Furious, the first movie.
That's right. Yes, he is.
Yeah. He is in Memoirs of Geisha. He is in your pick of American Gangster from episode 106.
Hell yeah.
He's in my pick of Shutter Island from episode 26.
Yes.
And he also starred in the TV show Monk. He is Monk's boss.
That's right. He's also in the remake of The Hills Have Eyes, directed by Alexandra Aja.
He is also in a biopic with Miles Teller called Bleed for This about a boxer.
Oh, cool.
He's been in a ton of stuff. He has great range. He is an unsung talent of Hollywood. I think a lot of people need to talk more about his other credits. Of course, this is his cornerstone of his career, but he has done other things very well. So big fan of Ted Levine.
Definitely.
A couple of bit parts in this movie that I did want to mention. Frankie Faison is the very nice guard at the psychiatric hospital who helps Clarice.
Oh, yeah.
He is Dennis Leary's partner in my pick of the Thomas Crown Affair.
Nice.
Yeah. And then Brooke Smith plays Catherine Martin, the young woman who's kidnapped. She appeared in a whole bunch of episodes of Grey's Anatomy as Dr. Erica Hahn.
I've never watched that show at all.
That's okay. I know some of our audience has, though, so I wanted to give her a shout out.
Oh, all right.
And she did really well in this movie, and she gained 25 pounds for the role.
Wow.
Yeah. Jonathan Demme directed this film. I'm pretty shocked that he didn't go on to have a more illustrious career after this movie.
Sure.
He directed Married to the Mob, which is an older film starring Alec Baldwin. He also directed Beloved, starring Danny Glover and Oprah, based on the Toni Morrison novel. And he directed Philadelphia.
Oh, very cool. That's
Yeah.
a great one.
Howard Shore scored this movie.
Nice.
Yeah. He is also the composer for The Departed, The Aviator, The Cell.
Yeah.
Serial killer pick of mine, actually, from the very beginning
Hell
of our
yeah.
podcast. Mrs. Doubtfire and my favorite of his, The Lord of the Rings.
Fuck yeah.
And there is a very purposeful decision to have the camera actually facing a lot of these characters head on. And the reason for this is because Jonathan Demme wanted to have this movie coming from the point of view of Clarice Starling. So that's why when a lot of the characters are talking to her, they're looking straight at the camera. And then when it cuts to her, she's actually looking slightly off camera. And that was a purposeful decision by Jonathan.
Oh, wow.
And Tak Fujimoto was the cinematographer of this film. He was also the cinematographer on Philadelphia, That Thing You Do, The Sixth Sense, Beloved, so a couple other Jonathan Demme movies, The Replacements, a pick of yours,
Yeah.
Signs, and The Happening.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. And this film has been popular since it was released. This is one of the films that we've picked that is on the revisit spectrum versus the underrated spectrum of our podcast. It was released February 14th of 1991. It had a budget of $19 million, which it recouped in its first week of release.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's badass.
It is. This movie made $131 million in the United States.
Damn.
And on a $19 million budget, it grossed $273 million worldwide.
Wow. That's amazing.
It is. And remember, when I talk about something a little bit later on, remember that this movie was released in February.
Yeah.
Okay. And this movie, similar to yours, is based a lot on reality, or at least has tried to be authentic as possible. The real-life FBI Behavioral Science Unit assisted in making this movie.
Oh, cool.
They received full cooperation from the FBI. They were allowed to film at the FBI training grounds. And
wow.
The FBI actually saw it as a potential recruiting tool to hire more women, which I think is great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Back when this movie was being made, John Douglas was the head of the Behavioral Science Unit at the time. And I'm not sure if you recognize that name, but he's actually...
I don't.
Oh, okay. He's actually become very famous for being the head of the Behavioral Science Unit and writing a bunch of books about his time there.
Oh.
He wrote the book Mindhunter, which I recommend.
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually where the show Mindhunter got a lot of its source material.
Okay, very cool.
He has written a bunch of books about the serial killers he's tracked. He helped with the search for Ted Bundy and several other serial killers. And in fact, Scott Glenn's character, Jack Crawford, is based on him. So Scott Glenn spent a bunch of time with him. And when this movie was being filmed, John Douglas was in the middle of searching for the Green River Killer.
Oh, damn.
Thankfully, though, this movie is actually not based on a true story. Dr. Hannibal Lecter and Buffalo Bill both are fictional characters, and the details of their murders were pulled from multiple real-life serial killers.
Yeah.
This is actually a movie based on a book. It's a book written by Thomas Harris, who went on to write several other books with Hannibal Lecter in it, which I'll get into in a little bit. But Gene Hackman actually bought the rights to this novel.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he planned to direct the movie and play either Lecter or Jack Crawford.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
But after watching a clip of himself in Mississippi Burning at the Academy Awards, it made him uneasy taking on more violent roles, so he let it go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's how Jonathan Demme got involved, and therefore that's how Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster were cast. And Anthony Hopkins was actually cast based on his performance in The Elephant Man as a doctor, Dr. Frederick Trevis. And he questioned Jonathan Demme and said that, but Dr. Trevis was a good man. Right? He was a good guy in that film. And Jonathan Demme replied, "So is Dr. Lecter. He's a good man too, just trapped in an insane mind."
Oh, wow.
And playing Lecter that way, I think, is one of the reasons why so many people have such an affinity for Dr. Lecter and almost good feelings towards him, right? He is way less creepy than Jean-Baptiste in Perfume.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
right?
I'll give you that. Definitely.
People have a little bit of even affection for Dr. Lecter because he played the role so well. And, he's alluring, and that's actually what's needed for serial killers in order to get their victims.
Definitely.
And to prepare for this role, Hopkins studied murderers and serial killers and watched interview tapes, attended some criminal trials. He is the one who came up with the idea of Hannibal Lecter never blinking.
Oh,
which is
wow.
a key piece of this character. When you watch this movie again, look for that because he does not blink and he's just like a predator always looking for his next victim. Yeah. Ooh.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and he came up with the voice as well, and he says it's a combination of Truman Capote and Katharine Hepburn, which I can kind of see, actually. I can
see that now. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I can actually really see it.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of this film, as I said, was shot in practical locations. They used FBI training grounds on Quantico. And the production went and scouted for the house that is Buffalo Bill's.
Oh, yeah.
Ted Levine was amazed to discover that the house being considered was not only in the town he grew up in, Bel Air, Ohio, but it was literally next door to the house of his high school girlfriend.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Which is also kind of creepy and I don't know.
That is wild.
That is so wild, yeah. And Ted Levine is the one who came up with the dance.
Really?
It was not included in the original screenplay.
Oh, wow.
He insisted on having it be in the movie because he thought the scene was essential in defining this character.
Oh, yeah, I'll give him that.
Which is true. 30-something years later, we still talk about that dance scene.
Yeah, and it's been mimicked many different times throughout cinema and TV, too.
Yes.
Goodbye Horses is one of those songs.
Oh, God, yeah. I can never not think of that scene when I hear that. Yeah. And Dr. Lecter mocking her accent in their first meeting was completely improvised by Anthony Hopkins on the spot.
Oh, cool.
So Jodie's horrified reaction was completely genuine, and they both were able to stay in character, and that's how we get that authentic
that's pretty
interaction between the two of them. She felt personally attacked, and in fact, she was terrified of Anthony Hopkins, and they rarely talked on set.
No way.
It was only after filming wrapped that they actually started to build a relationship together.
Wow. I guess if you're making a movie like that where you have to really be... I don't know. I'm not an actor, but I respect both ways. Like building a rapport at the beginning or building it after.
Right.
And I like the after thing. It's kind of similar to Ryan Reynolds in Amityville Horror that we discussed a few weeks ago. He didn't talk to the kids. He didn't have any interaction with them because he wanted to make sure that his character was coming off as a real bastard. And I think that Anthony Hopkins did a great job with that.
Yeah, and Sissy Spacek and Carrie, and
oh yeah,
several instances of that being a thing, and I think it is a good decision.
I agree.
And like I said, this movie was super well, as the box office proves, this movie was super popular when it came out. And I'm so stoked for this piece of trivia because you and I got in a little bit of a, not disagreement last week, but we certainly chose sides last week during a discussion about this. Chicago Tribune film critic Gene Siskel hated this movie.
Oh, really?
He gave it only 2 stars. He said that Jonathan superheats The Silence of the Lambs to the point of silliness, which, what movie did you watch, dude?
Right? Yeah, what's going on here?
In terms of both gross behavior and pulsating soundtrack, the conclusion of the film is nothing more than a grisly version of every mad slasher picture you've ever missed.
Wow.
On the other hand, Roger Ebert loved this movie and would continue to ridicule Gene Siskel for missing the boat on it for years to come.
No kidding.
Yeah, so since you chose Siskel's camp last week, it gave me immense pleasure to bring up that piece of trivia.
For sure.
And even though Anthony Hopkins is so iconic for this role, not only did he and Jodie Foster only share 4 scenes together,
wow,
At 24 minutes 52 seconds of screen time, it is the second shortest performance ever to win an Academy Award for Best Actor.
Nice.
He only appears in 21% of this film.
Whoa, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Anthony Hopkins has been nominated for Oscars 6 times. He's won twice. As we discussed, he won for The Father when I was talking about his credits. And of course, this movie. He was also nominated for The Remains of the Day, Nixon, Amistad, and also The Two Popes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Good for him.
And not only was Anthony Hopkins nominated and won the Oscar in 1992 for this movie, but remember, as I said, this movie came out in February of 1991, and we always talk about how Oscar season, if you want Oscar bait movies or if you want your movie to be considered for Oscars, you need to be releasing it in like October, November, December, because the Oscars are in February and March of the following year, right? This movie was so good and so popular. For 12 months, the Academy remembered and gave it this many nominations.
That is so badass.
It was nominated for 7 Oscars.
Awesome.
Best Film Editing, Best Sound. It won for Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Actor, and Best Picture.
Hell yeah.
It is
history in the making right there.
It is one of only 3 movies to win the top 5 Oscars: actor, actress, director, picture, and screenplay.
Awesome.
The other 2 are It Happened One Night and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, sweet.
Entertainment Weekly has voted this as the 4th scariest movie of all time.
Wow.
It is number 23 on IMDb's top 250 movies.
Damn.
Yeah. And Clarice Starling was chosen by AFI as the 6th greatest movie superhero ever.
Oh, wow.
She's the highest ranked female on the list. And Dr. Hannibal Lecter was chosen as the number 1 greatest movie villain of all time.
Damn, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah. And so that is The Silence of the Lambs. It gives me absolute pleasure to discuss the film on this podcast. It is one of my all-time favorite films. I was introduced to it by my older sister, Shannon, at way too young of age, but that's okay. Didn't traumatize me too much. I still love it, and I'm still recommending it to this day. My mother loves this movie, like I said, and like we said. We don't know anyone who doesn't like this movie, and if you want to give it a rewatch or even watch it for the first time, if you have been blessed with being able to have a first-time experience with this movie, you can stream it on Amazon Prime.
Awesome. I watched my Blu-ray copy.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also have a VHS and DVD copy of it as well.
Of course you do.
Yes, I do.
Well, all right. Those are our serial killer picks. John, would you watch Perfume with your grandma?
I don't know. That's a tough one. It's so insane and twisted. I don't know. I'm just gonna go with I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if I can land on yes or no. I feel like my grandmother would like it, but then I feel like she'd be repulsed by it.
I don't think anyone under the age of like 19 should watch this film.
Yeah.
Either film, actually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say that's a good solid point. And V, would you watch Silence of the Lambs with your grandmother?
I don't think either one of them would actually have a problem with it, especially because it's just so well made and polished. It's not grotesque or gratuitous, even though it's very intense.
Yeah.
I'd watch this movie with my mother.
Okay.
I might have already, actually, now that I think about it. But yeah, I mean, I think that it doesn't have any sex in it.
Nope.
It has intense scenes, of course, and some graphic depictions of murder, or at least of dead bodies, actually, is the better way to put it.
Sure.
So at your own discretion for this movie, for sure. But like we said, nobody under 19 should be anywhere near either of these films.
Yeah. I know, you think about it like, oh, well, this was done in the 90s. Yeah, it's still fucked up and crazy and twisted.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it holds up so well.
Definitely.
Well, all right. That was, weird enough to say, a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really glad we were able to discuss these movies this week. And John and I actually talked about it, and since we have some lost episodes in October, we've decided to extend our horror/thriller month by one more week and do a Josh Hartnett-themed episode.
Oh, yeah.
John, do you want to tell everybody what you picked?
Sure. I chose a movie from the year 2004, starring Josh Hartnett, Rose Byrne, Diane Kruger, and Matthew Lillard. This is a film that I went in blindly to see and left completely loving it, and I still love it to this day. This is Wicker Park, everybody, and if you care to follow along, it is on Pluto or Tubi, or you can rent it on Amazon or Apple for $2.99.
And I decided to go a little more camp with next week's pick. It is a high school classic. I am returning to the alien genre for next week's pick. I decided to go with the 1998 Josh Hartnett, Elijah Wood vehicle, The Faculty.
Oh, wow, Elijah Wood is in it? I truly do not remember him in The Faculty.
You probably just remember Fan K. Jansen.
That's exactly right.
Which is fair.
Yeah.
And if you want to follow along, you can watch The Faculty if you have a Pluto TV or Paramount Plus subscription.
Magnificent. Who directed The Faculty?
Robert Rodriguez.
Yes, he did.
We're big fans of him on this show and can't wait to dive into both of those movies, especially because I've never seen Wicker Park.
All right, sweet. Well, I hope you enjoy Wicker Park.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We will continue to release our episodes on Wednesdays, back to the schedule that we've always had now that we're off our hiatus. Again, thank you all so much for sticking with us and rejoining us for these discussions. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and follow us along on social media so you do get those updates when we have them, especially the ones that were unplanned.
Exactly.
And until you join us again next week, we love to end our podcast with film is a form of art, and in art, every opinion is valid, except if you think
Dustin Hoffman can play a convincing Italian.
That's a good one. Agreed.
All right, fantastic.
All right, everybody, until next week, bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.